Okay. Okay, we're sitting here with Mark Street, and it's October of '08. Thank you so much, sir.
Of course,
Appreciate
of course.
It. And what year were you born?
63.
63, okay.
Halloween.
I was born in 53, so we're 10 years different. So what, let's see if this is, that's turning, and this, that red light's on there?
Yeah, it's blinking, flashing.
Does that mean good?
Yeah, as long as the red dot is on there.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so what is the best thing for a human being?
The best thing for a human being is enthusiasm.
Wow, that's a good answer.
It's a Doris Day, not Doris Day, Doris, a Catholic worker woman. You know who I'm talking about? Hey, Lynn, who's the Catholic worker woman?
He's already cheating.
What's her name? Doris,
She says that?
Dorothy Day.
Dorothy Day.
Says that?
Yeah, she says all we have is enthusiasm.
All we have.
All we have,
Beautiful.
or the best thing we have is enthusiasm.
The best thing we have is enthusiasm. I like that.
And it's on their sheets. When you get the Catholic worker, sheets about their struggles throughout the world.
They're like political Catholic people?
Yeah, like really lefty, Catholic people. Yeah.
What is your favorite form of information?
My favorite form of information. That's a tough question. I mean, I think that, I get a lot from reading and a lot from watching, so, I don't know. I mean, I think that there's a way both of those forms of information envelop you.
Right.
And I look forward to being enveloped in that way. We were just out last night, and I said, we were walking up the steps, and I said, I can't wait to be in my book, So that's a way that I...
You said it verbally, or you thought it...
Oh, yeah. Verbally, yeah.
You can't wait to be in your book, meaning you're writing a book or reading a book?
Reading a book.
Yeah.
So when you said form... Hi,
Lynn.
What time am I supposed to be back here?
An hour and a half, say 12:30.
2.
2.
Yeah, 2.
Okay, bye.
So, so I don't know if I can privilege,
Right.
watching a film versus reading, but
Yeah.
they're both, enveloping in
Right.
a way that I admire.
Or even spoken word.
Yeah, or even spoken word. I mean, I think that I would privilege reading and watching a film over the spoken word myself.
Great. Okay, that helped. Now, why do you think humans collect information?
I think some of it is to better.
Mark, I'm sorry, I need the car key.
Yeah.
You don't want to jump start it? There you are, sweetie. You didn't hear a word, did you?
Thanks, Lynn. And you got a water. If you don't, grab one. You got a water?
Is this your? Why don't you take it out of the bike? Because then I can drink this
right.
one.
Okay.
Here's one, Lynn.
Married
Here. Lynn, here's one right here, a full one.
No, I don't want to open a new one. I'll just use it.
Just use that one out of the bottle. Okay. So why do they collect information?
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think that some of it has a use. Like an end result, and then some of it is just the activity of collecting, the sort of obsessive need to just collect, have, And a couple things come to mind. One is this Henry Darger show in New York. You know who Henry Darger is? Yeah. But the way he's obsessively, collecting stuff, and you're like, there's no end to this. It's just about collecting, And the other is my former film professor Adolphus Makis at Bard. This was after I'd left.
Jonas's brother?
Jonas's brother, yeah. After I'd left, so I didn't see this, but I heard about it, that when video first came out, he would go to the Blockbuster, and he would just rent however many films he could rent, every day, and come back to the department and copy them. So he was sort of building this library, and it was kind of like, do we really need, Singing in the Rain? Do we really need? I mean, sure, I love it, but you know, it was interesting,
Right.
and it made me think that it was this kind of obsessive, salting away of information or
It's
film or
it's
whatever.
what do we really need to ever watch most films twice?
Yeah.
Why do you buy films
Yeah.
from VHS on? It's like, but if it started with Harold and Maude and King of Hearts, it's like, why do you see a film twice? It was like people are. But Henry Darger, just really briefly, his amazing point is, folk artists are obsessed with collecting, and that's what it's the process of adding.
Yeah.
So folk artists, or whatever you call them, outside artists. Simon Rodeo, who made Watts Towers, is often thought of in that category, but some have declared him, no, he's not that. He's a visionary artist. He knows what he's working towards.
That's
and
interesting.
once he accomplished it 30 years later, he says, I'm done, bye.
Yeah, yeah.
And he just said, you didn't even say collect $5 for everybody who sees this and send me half. He just left.
Walked away. Yeah.
And visionary artists have that vision. Well, it's still a process of adding, but they have said. He saw the towers when he was a kid, 300 men carrying towers in these Italian processions. He goes, I'm going to do that someday. I'm going to make that.
Huh.
So that's amazing you brought up Henry Darger, because I talk about him constantly in a lot of what we're talking about. So is this tendency or need to collect information nature or nurture? Did we learn it, or are we hardwired?
I think we learn it. I mean, I think that I wouldn't say this about everything, but this particular thing, I think we sort of watch our parents and, sort of hook into their obsessions in different ways, people, like my father is not a book collector, but he's a French professor, and he, very connected to his books, and stuff. And I'm the kind of guy that, like, I love to give books away. I love to read a book and just give it away. And the idea of a library at home is like, why, But I think I've kind of inherited his obsession in a different way, And hey, do you know Alan Berliner's work at all?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but if you go to his house sometime when you're in New York, have you ever been there?
No, but I saw it in the movie. Yeah.
It's incredible.
He's
I mean,
like
it's
the Joseph Cornell, like
yeah,
everything. Yeah.
it's incredible.
So you're saying it's learned. That this.
I'm saying it's learned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so can you conjure up an earliest memory?
Of filmmaking?
No, any your earliest memory.
Oh, my earliest.
What is your earliest memory?
Wow. My earliest memory is a kind of blacktop at a house where we lived in Wisconsin, and we only lived there for 4 years. We moved when I was 4, but I remember being on the driveway, and I remember being blacktop, and I remember that.
Do you think memory is a curse or a blessing?
Well, there's this new Randy Newman album, and he's got this song, God bless the potholes in my memory, in the road of my memory, or something. And it's like this really...
God bless the potholes. That's beautiful.
In the road of my memory, and it's just like, he takes on these personas, and this persona is this sort of old man who's been hurt, like he's been fucked over a lot, and he's like... he's looking back and he's like, but I don't remember half of it. And I'm glad I don't remember half of it because it's all hurt, So, that's interesting because I just wrote this short story about a guy who was afraid of losing his memory. And let me think about it. Okay, memories are a curse or a blessing. I mean, I think that in terms of being an artist, you always want to reinvent yourself. So sometimes a memory can be like a, it's the process of discovery that you're after with each work. So if you have a memory, if you remember how you did something, sometimes you're sort of doomed to repeat it in some ways. People say, well, you have to know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. But as an artist, you want to repeat the process, and you want to be new. You want to keep it fresh. So if you have a memory of how you worked through some problem, it can be a curse.
Yeah. Interesting. Um, who were your early role models within your immediate family, and maybe outside your immediate family? Just briefly, like what specifically did you learn from them or were influenced?
Very early, you mean? Like
Either way, I mean, basically within your family, early is good, but outside your family, it doesn't have to be early.
Yeah.
You know, you can take any of these questions any way you want. If there's somebody within your immediate family and it wasn't until you were 20, that's fine too. However, you know.
Well, I remember early. I mean, my brother was 8 years older than me, so it was a big gap. But he was
Two total in your family?
two total, yeah. And he was always a writer. He was always into literature and music and stuff. So I remember one Christmas, I was like, maybe 10, and I remember he gave me Sail Away by Randy Newman and Highway 61 Revisited, and they were like Greek to me, and I remember playing those things over and over and over, and that was an early, I always thought he had the portal to the cool, the cool stuff, so that was an early kind of influence, and then we went to France a lot. My father was a French professor, and he would bring students over. So I was sort of in with the students from a young age,
And so they're like 10 years older than you, or 5, or?
Well, they're like 10 years older, So they all seem really cool to me, yeah. And some of them played music, and I liked that a lot, which I never got around to doing myself. But they were early, and then later on, after high school, I moved out on a farm. And it was a farm that was run by a guy named John Peterson. And since then, there's been a movie about him called The Real Dirt on Farmer John.
I've seen that.
Yeah. So that's the guy, and I lived on that farm for a year after after high school. So he was a really huge influence because he was a real iconoclast, and he was a visionary, and he had different ways of doing things, and he was idiosyncratic, and and I was really, like, I didn't want to go to college because I thought it was like a straitjacket kind of experience, and he really, I really looked up to him, and I really, saw a a way that you could be iconoclastic and idiosyncratic in this way that would really meant a lot.
And so you chose not to go to college, probably because you're so involved with your dad being a college professor. Then did you, after the farm, go to college?
Yeah.
And
I worked
by your own choice, or were they
by my own
always
choice.
saying you should go to college?
Well, they were always saying that, but it was my choice.
But they let you go to the farm too.
Yeah, I mean,
They didn't fight
I was
it and
of
go,
age.
"You're-"
Well, they did. They thought it was a fucked up decision, but
And how long before you went to the?
it was just a year.
Oh, you did a year at the farm.
A year
and
at the
then-
farm, and then I went off to college.
And
yeah.
did you study filmmaking?
Yeah, right away. Yeah.
What college?
Bard.
Okay. Now, meta. Okay. Wow, I didn't know we jumped to that already. Okay. So humans have this tendency to recreate things in order to get them.
Uh-huh.
Use metaphor. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin, and eventually says, "I'm out of here, man. Why should I go inside a building and look at a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" And then Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism.
Uh-huh.
And then your wife so astutely added, like, well, they call it bitch slap. She just lapped it back in my face and said, "Well, John Cage says, why should we play Beethoven when I can just open the window and listen to street noises?"
Right.
That was like, come on with it. I want more for these. So you see, why do humans have to, and that was the other thing she addressed, have to. I need a new word there. Why are we drawn to recreating things? Why don't we just sit under an apple tree, the apple falls, we eat the apple, and watch the clouds, and that's our TV and art museum? I mean, why do we have to recreate things?
Well, I think I want to go back to this idea of distance. Like everybody talks about proximity. Like I want to be close. I want to recreate something exactly, or I want to have an experience that follows the original exactly, in living color or something. But I think there's something to be gained from being outside of an experience. And a friend of mine said, who's a writer, said, I love to read because then I don't have to think, because I'm like, I'm distanced, I can follow somebody else's thoughts, and I'm divorced from my own thoughts. And most people would say, "Oh, I love to read because then I think," But I think he's onto something there, and I think for me, movies are about a certain kind of, or they mimic a certain sort of alienation I feel in the world that I value. I mean, rather than running from it, I really value it, and I think that, I'm kind of remote psychologically, and I like creating these kind of distant situations that are a little bit less about looking and more about voyeurism, if you want to look at it that way, that have a remove to them.
And so I understand everything you said, and I got 3 great comments, but I still, why? So what are you saying? Why do we have to recreate?
Well, I think. I mean, I'm focusing on the experience of watching these things we recreate, but I think that we recreate things to to kind of create a distance.
To create a distance, not so much to get them better.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
That was my
Brilliant.
That was my train of thought.
Not to recreate them. It's
to remove ourselves from
I love to read because I don't have to think. Bridget Bardot says, "I don't think when I make love." That, and then Joan Didion and McLuhan said the great things they say. I don't know what I'm gonna say. I don't know what I think until I've said it. And Joan says, I don't know what I'm gonna write. No, I don't know what I'm think until I write it.
That's beautiful.
Isn't that amazing? So that, and then Beefheart said it all. He says, I've had too much to think. Okay, man, you're good at this. Okay, 9. I'm doing exact countdown, so this is, because it always is one question bumps up a future question because of something you brought up. So I'm going to try to stay.
That's fine.
So we can, put the edit, right next to each other. So Lewis Hine changed laws with with photographs of child labor in newspapers in the 20s.
Right.
Upton Sinclair changed laws with the novel The Jungle.
Right.
Okay. Leonard Cohen says, I want a poem and a song that rages and changes laws. So, has any film, video, theater, or art piece ever been the actual tipping point to change laws? I'm not after We Shall Overcome, help the civil rights movement. I'm for that. I know about the zeitgeist of things, but I'm asking specifically if you can think of any art piece, film, theater, or movie film that actually was the tipping point to change the law.
I can't think of any except I would have said The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, but you already mentioned it.
Right.
Yeah, I can't think of any.
That's all right. And please do. A lot of these are keep thinking, and if you come up with it, even if it's 3 years out. Yeah. This question I've been hounding for 2 years, and I do get it. Your wife really astutely turned me on to a great one, and I got another one, but usually it's people are really confident with the answer, and they go, oh, and Van Dyke Park says, oh yeah, all these
Van Dyke Park, the pianist?
Yeah,
wow.
He said, all international, all these songs, every revolution has had a song. But that's not the and it's a stupid little fussy thing I'm asking for, but it's just
a specific.
Yeah. It's just the tipping point. It's the very tipping point. Although Upton Sinclair and Hine weren't part of a zeitgeist, they are part of a zeitgeist that's happening. It's not the only thing, but we want to think it is.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's why it's a funny little question.
I mean, you could think about standard operating procedure. Well, you know what? You could look at standard operating procedure by Errol Morris.
Right.
You know, or I just read the Susan Sontag article regarding the torture of others.
Right.
And it's about the photographs of Abu Ghraib and how
Right.
and how that, like, if you want to see photographs as
Right.
Images or
Right.
whatever, they brought that injustice home, and they influenced the discussion about the Patriot Act and stuff like
Right.
that.
Let's do a diversion because I love and appreciate Earl, and I'm sure you do. I find he turned McNamara into a movie star when he should, and I don't want to tell him not to do what he did, but I mean, Alan Watts said, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Uh-huh.
Even Martin Luther says the only way to deal with the devil is mock him.
Yeah.
So Earl's got this, he's probably our best documentarian who can get it in a movie theater where people are going to eat popcorn.
Yeah.
But then I see McNamara's picture. You know how on movie ads you see it like 8 times?
Yeah.
It's like McNamara everywhere. It's like, dang! So I've always wanted to talk to Earl, and we went to SOP at UCLA to actually ask him this. But you can't do it as an attack dog.
Uh-huh.
How do you feel when people accuse you as, hoiking up a war criminal?
Yeah.
Or giving a war criminals, so I can just say, well, we won, so we write the history.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I think that he was hoping to give him enough rope,
And he did. He hung himself, but in the long run, it's just like Supersize Me. Makes kids go eat McDonald's afterwards.
Yeah, I could agree with you there.
Oh man, I left out a big question with Lynn, so that I'll ask you. That's the other thing. So I have a workshop I'd like to do called How HBO and PBS Have Hijacked the Revolution. And basically, we can all just sit there and watch it on TV now, whether it's a Weather Underground documentary, which was brilliant, or the Patty Hearst, or SOP, and all that, or Inconvenient Truth. So in the long run, do they activate us or pacify us?
Such a big question. I'm teaching a class now called Representation in Art, and it's all about this idea of, how work can activate us, and whether it makes us angry or whether it, tells us what we already know, or whether it, how it gets us out of the, out of our chairs in some ways. And, there again, I mean, going back to this idea of distance or alienation, you could think about Brechtian ideas, Brecht. Like, I think those HBO documentaries you mentioned are very much about proximity, like getting people close to something on an emotional level. And Brecht would argue that we need to be distant from a problem in order to apprehend it. He calls it the alienation effect, and that's why his actors in his plays never they always read things in really wooden lines, and they didn't inhabit the characters. They just read everything in a really flat, distant, alienated way. So you were supposed to look, and you were supposed to be outraged and distant, and then realize that capitalism is wrong, or the horror of the truth, rather than going, okay, here I am, and I'm watching Schindler's List, and I'm crying, and it's all emotional, and I feel close, and then you leave the theater, and nothing has changed. Right. You've left all the emotion there. So
amazing.
It's interesting. I don't know what to think about that.
Yeah, Mark, you're teaching me a lot. And Auden said it so well. He says the mystery of art is we don't know if it activates us or pacifies us.
Yeah.
That's a real heavy one, because we let's just get into art. It's so cool. It feels so good. And, all that. I can tell you're into Randy Newman, it's like, it feels so good to put it on over and over.
Yeah.
And then what does it do to you in the long run? It makes me feel good. Is that so bad?
Right.
Yeah, he had the great line. We saw him live solo at the break because he took an intermission. He goes, I'm going to go, this was like 2 years ago, I'm going to go backstage and snort a fucking ton of coke right now.
Exactly. I saw him at Carnegie Hall. He did the same thing.
Does he do the same
And he can only do it because he's
that
not.
He doesn't.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
He's got the shooting. He's like, I'm going to go shoot up.
He should go OD, you know.
Exactly.
He should do it like Jackson. I'm going to fucking OD as a performance art piece.
Exactly.
No, I'm not saying he should. I'm just saying, yeah, you know what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying, yeah.
Okay.
Let me just say one thing, couple things. There's a good article by a woman named Karen Hansen, and I can send it to you.
Okay.
It's called How Bad Can Good Art Be? And it's all about the idea
Good.
of what, how can art activate us? And I guess what she says is a number of things. She says, okay, look, does art really have that much of an effect on us? Because you can't have it both ways. You can't say that art alienates us, but also if you watch pornography, that means you're going to go out and be a rapist. You can't have it both. You can't say it alienates us and it influences us.
Yeah.
You have to have it one of two ways. And then she quotes Tom Stoppard, who said, if you see an injustice out your window, the last thing you should do is stop and write a play about it. That's the least effective means of fighting something, because what does a play do? You can call the police, you can go out, you can do whatever, but a play's not going to do the thing. But anyway, I'll send it to you. It's what we already know, or whether it, how it gets us out of out of our chairs in some ways. And, there again, going back to this idea of distance or alienation, you could think about Brechtian ideas, Brecht. Like, I think those HBO documentaries you mentioned are very much about proximity, like getting people close to something on an emotional level. And Brecht would argue that we need to be distant from a problem in order to apprehend it. He calls it the alienation effect, and that's why his actors in his plays never they always read things in really wooden lines, and they didn't inhabit the characters. They just read everything in a really flat, distant, alienated way. So you were supposed to look and you were supposed to be outraged and distant, and then realize that capitalism is wrong, or the horror of the truth, rather than going, okay, here I am and I'm watching Schindler's List and I'm crying and it's all emotional and I feel close, and then you leave the theater and nothing has changed. Right. You've left all the emotion there. So
amazing.
It's interesting. I don't know what to think about that.
Mark, you're teaching me a lot. And Auden said it so well. He says the mystery of art is we don't know if it activates us or pacifies us.
Yeah.
That's a real heavy one, because we let's just get into art. It's so cool. It feels so good. And, all that, I can tell you're into Randy Newman. It's like, it feels so good to put it on over and over.
Yeah.
And then what does it do to you in the long run? It makes me feel good. Is that so bad?
Right.
Yeah, he had the great line. We saw him live solo at the break because he took an intermission. He goes, I'm going to go, this was like 2 years ago, I'm going to go backstage and snort a fucking ton of coke right now.
Exactly. I saw him at Carnegie Hall. He did the same thing.
Does he do the same thing?
And he can only do it because he's
he doesn't.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
he's going to go shoot up.
He should go OD,
Exactly.
He should do it like Jackson. I'm going to fucking OD as a performance art piece.
Exactly.
No, I'm not saying he should. I'm just saying, yeah, you know what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying, yeah.
Okay.
Let me just say one thing, couple things. There's a good article by a woman named Karen Hansen, and I can send it to you.
Okay.
It's called How Bad Can Good Art Be? And it's all about the idea of what, how can art activate us? And I guess what she says is a number of things. She says, okay, look, does art really have that much of an effect on us? Because you can't have it both ways. You can't say that art alienates us, but also if you watch pornography, that means you're going to go out and be a rapist. You can't have it both. You can't say it alienates us and it influences us. You have to have it one of two ways. And then she quotes Tom Stoppard, who said, if you see an injustice out your window, the last thing you should do is stop and write a play about it. That's the least effective means of fighting something, because what does a play do? You can call the police, you can go out, you can do whatever, but a play's not going to do the thing. But anyway, I'll send it to you. It's really good.
Well, that's another one of my workshops. If you're shooting a documentary on street kids in Brazil and one of them starts to beat shit out of the other one, should you put your camera down and stop it?
So true.
Or should you film it so the rest of the world might learn about it?
Yeah.
So that Stoppard is heavy. So he's just dissing his own art.
Exactly.
So he can look at, I'm not saying it's bad. He's just saying, you should. But, okay, so that perfectly leads into so I'm at the Annarbor Film Festival, which we're going to get a little more specific into, and the screenwriting teacher says, I think a great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Mm-hmm. Then as I ask people that, I spread the question around. The one guy goes, Kubrick says the exact opposite. He says, if you clearly see the intention, I think a great film is when you can't see the intention.
Right.
Could you comment on that?
Well, I think that... I think, what I want to feel when I see, I don't want to speak in, I just want to talk about what I like to look at.
Yeah.
And I think that I want to feel the obsession of the maker in some ways, and I want to feel their passion, and I want to feel they're almost like perverse, not necessarily sexually perverse, but intellectually perverse or emotionally perverse, desire and compulsion to make the work.
Yeah.
Like Darger or like anybody. I want to feel this guy's nuts. Right. Berliner, what a nut. They're all, I want to feel this kind of, I want to feel their propulsion. Yeah. And if I feel a distance or a kind of, all right, I'm making a film to make a film, or I'm making a film because I think that, whatever it is, I want to feel the passion, not some career move. So, in terms of intention, I think that's different. I think an intention is like an intellectual concept, like this is what I hope you get out of it. But what I like to feel is the passion and the kind of core, craziness that put them into that world.
Very well put. Thank you. McLuhan said there's no such thing as a good or bad movie. It's a good or bad viewing experience.
Oh, that's interesting. There's in this Karen Hansen article, there's an Oscar Wilde quote, and he says, there's no such thing as engaged art. It's just good or bad art, or it's interesting. I gotta sum up that quote. But
so you're saying Oscar almost says the opposite?
Well, he says, he sort of puts it into, he sort of says art. Art for art's sake. It's just good or bad. It's not whether it's engaged or it's not whether it's morally good or bad. It's just aesthetically good or bad. Is what he's saying. I gotta come up with the quote a little bit better in a minute. But okay, good or bad. No such thing as a good or bad film.
It's a good or bad viewing experience.
Well, I think that I agree. I think it reflects back on this idea of subjectivity on the part of the maker, and to me that's where we are now. Like it's about the subjectivity of the artist was well documented in the early part of the 20th century with Picasso, and this idea that there's no such thing as a representational work, and it's all about whether it's the first person in journalism with Hunter Thompson, or the hand of the painter with other artists. It was all about sort of experiencing what the artist experienced, and I think that's all great. And now, maybe post McLuhan or whatever, we're sort of looking back at the experience of the viewer a little bit more, and it might be some combination of the experience of tracing the experience of the artist, but also paying attention to experience of the viewer,
Mhm.
and that could be about that kind of subjective experience. Like something like Empire. That McLuhan's comment points to the importance of the viewing experience.
Right.
Not the
Right.
film, not even the
Right.
film, and it's not the maker. It's what what we experience when we're viewing, and I
Right.
value that.
Right, and that most people don't realize that Marshall wasn't about saying he wasn't saying there's no content at all in films and nothing matter. He's just like Beavis and Butthead saying it like as a joke, and people take it. He's pushing to extreme to make his point.
Right.
And then everything you said is what people don't realize he updated the medium as a message in 20 years to user as content. And he updated Global Village to Global Theater. So we're all actors on this big stage. As soon as Sputnik went up, it formed a prosimian arch around the whole world, and we're just all acting. And it's like, just watch YouTube or TMZ. We're all,
Yeah.
That's it. Okay. Now,
apparently he taught where I teach, Fordham.
Taught at Fordham.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so that was. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Not really. I mean, it was my father was a sort of secular humanist, sort of anti-organized religion kind of guy, and my mother's Catholic. So when my brother was growing up, he was confirmed, and he went to church for a while, and then by the time it came to me, it's sort of the struggle when I was never confirmed, and I went to church for a while, but never really took, and I ended up not being religious. So.
And so Peter Greenaway said, cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. Do you think experimental filmmakers are telling stories in a different way or doing something completely different?
Well, it depends on the experimental filmmaker, but just to be definite about things, I think that they're doing something completely different. And I think that, to me, experimental film as I see it, and impossible to define, blah blah blah. But it is, it's not anti-narrative in the sense that it says here's a narrative and I'm going to do something different. It's more like a different realm entirely, and it's at the level of the experience of viewing. It's at the level of optical toys and vision, and some ideas from painting and some ideas from experimental music and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's where it's going. That's the kind of pantheon for me. That kind of, wow, this is cool. The kind of phenomenon, visual phenomenon. So it's not like, oh, let me tell a story in a weird way.
Yeah.
It's more like, wow, this is cool. This is amazing. I've never seen anything like this. That's the phenomenon. I think.
Right. That's good.
And that's why I hear that Ken Jacobs and Brakhage and all those guys love the IMAX movies.
Did they? Oh.
Because Ken's still alive, of course, but I think those that's a phenomenon. You go there, and those have become more and more narrative, which is the wrong direction for me. But when you go to those things, like with my kids or something, you just go, wow, that's a big beetle going around that corn stuff. I think that's great, And
in fact, I saw IMAX. I saw Extreme Sports, which I had never seen ever, really. And then I saw it in IMAX, and I was like, holy moly! It was like, but as Lynn and I talked about, and I usually bring in this, and you actually answered the question how I want people to answer it, is that they're doing something completely different. But when we watch Flicker, it's not that we could have a story going on in our head, but did Tony Conrad say, well, I'm going to tell a story? He didn't. We don't know his intention unless we ask him. But it's sort of like, maybe back to the other question, is storytelling learned, or are we hardwired? Because we can't, in other words, we can't avoid if you show Flickr to someone and they have a story go in their head.
Yeah.
So does that mean Flickr's not storytelling? Well, no, the guy you did storytelling. But so basically, do you think storytelling is something we learned or are we hardwired?
Oh, I think we learned it.
We learned
I
it,
think we
okay.
learned it. But I think you're right. I showed something in class the other day, and it was oh, I know what it was. It was Chantal Ackerman's Dest.
Okay.
And it's a great film. It's this long static shots of, Poland and different places and stuff like that. But anyway, my students said, that was really boring. But they were open to it, and they said, but I kept thinking about all this stuff during these shots. So in a way, it was more narrative than a story because their minds were more engaged and active, and they were trying to make narrative sense to it narrative sense of it in a variety of ways, and it was no less narrative in a certain sort of way. It was kind of more narrative.
But in narrative is hijack, and not meaning hijack is a bad thing. Cinema from about the 20s on. We have there is no, sadly we haven't had a chance to form an aesthetic on experimental film in America, unless you're a rich kid who went to college.
Yeah, that's true.
That to me is sad because Jackson Pollock ended up on the cover of Life magazine in the 50s, and people could start forming an aesthetic on what experimental painting was.
Yeah, that's true.
And so so what do we do about this? We start the Annarbor Film Festival.
Hey, let me just mention one thing.
Ahead.
Scott McDonald's book, Motion Studies, Avant-Garde Film Motion Studies. Do you know that book?
I don't know that one, but I know him. I know his books.
Yeah, well, check it out because his argument is that there's this kind of there's a strain in avant-garde film that tries to go back to this kind of proto-cinematic.
What's proto?
Like before cinema, this kind of
it goes back to
optical toys and the phenomenon
to proto cinematic
to pre-narrative cinema,
Okay, to pre-narrative. Okay.
Yeah, and it's pretty good, The other article that's good is this guy who teaches at San Diego, Lev Manovich.
Don't know him.
And he has an article called "What is Digital Cinema?" And it's about how, to him, the digital age, sort of in this McLuhan sense, actually, the digital age allows us to redefine cinema according to its roots. And its roots are really kind of like anti-narrative and phenomenological and playful. And
right.
Digital allows us to be playful in a way.
That is
in shred narrative.
Shred narrative.
He doesn't say shred narrative, but
why are you a heavy metal head inside? Is that where you got shred?
I don't know. I just
what does shred mean to you?
Shred?
Yeah, I mean, what's the root of you using that word?
Well,
not heavy metal.
No,
not a guitar
just,
shredding.
You
mean to put it through those shredders?
Yeah, just to kind of just to be done
good.
with it. So,
good, Mark.
anyway.
You're really good. I appreciate this a lot. So you. Oh, okay. Somehow I didn't number this key question, but we're going to the Annarbor Film Festival a little. You've attended over the years.
Once, yeah.
Once you attended, okay, and you've entered several times.
Yeah, a bunch of times early on, and then less so lately. But
accepted every time or rejected?
No, rejected a bunch of times. Actually.
Bunch of times
yeah.
rejected.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say me and you were sitting around with George Manupelli some 47 years ago, and we're starting the Annarbor Film Festival, and now we hear this little point that I learned from Chick Strand, and she said when her and Bruce started Canyon Cinema screenings, that they were trying to recreate their 11-cent movie-going experience and show a serial, a cartoon, a feature, and then an experimental film.
Interesting.
And so Brackage came in and saw that happening. He goes, you should show a lot of other stuff. Just show experimental film.
Right.
So we are sitting there with George. Do we want to be inclusive or exclusive?
That is such a good question. And you're asking me what would be my druthers?
Right. I'm saying me and you and George are sitting there. What are you going to say then?
Oh, I would argue vehemently against the brackage position and for the more populist, inclusive position.
You would,
I would.
right? At that point.
At that point.
At 47 years ago, you would say inclusive.
Yeah, I mean,
So you would say we got to show a Betty Boop, Hollywood film, and then experimental. You know, or whatever. You know, yeah.
Well, listen.
No, I'm not trying to fight it.
I would say that most of the focus should be on experimental film, but I would be more inclusive than exclusively. I mean, I don't think that the thing I wouldn't want is I wouldn't want experimental film to be to take a backseat. The way you just said it, it sounds like there's a Hollywood film as a feature, and then there's all these other things around it, and that's too much like the world as we know it. And I think that what I would argue for is a sort of alternate universe where you have, you know, like a cartoon and then, you know, some kind of mostly experimental film, but with the possibility of bringing in some narrative as well.
Right. Because that always has happened. We've always had some narrative, but very little. We've always had animation and documentary, which weren't necessarily experimental animation and documentary, but more so. But the majority was, you know, and the big thing in Ann Arbor is that over the last 3 or 4 years, it's gone much more inclusive, to the point where, you know, Brian Konevsky says, that's just a fucking Nike commercial.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, it's a kid who goes to Rhode Island School of Design, he's got a lot of money, and he's got an aerial shot. It's like, that ain't experimental.
Yeah,
or the doc on Larry Flynn had a crane shot at the porn Oscars in Vegas, and I'm going, this is not Ann Arbor. And so, you know, and so there's some of us, very few, who are like, the heck's going on here? But in the reality is, don't we want a world that everything is, and not like we're elitist? We're just like Ann Arbor being, you know, Vicky holding off for so many years saying no video. Most people were like, yeah, right on. Yeah. But, you know, I don't go on frameworks, but supposedly you go on frameworks at all?
Not anymore.
So, but they were all just 16 mil, or they're all film.
Yeah.
You know. But why don't you go on anymore?
Frameworks?
Yeah.
But, you know, can I go back to this thing about the inclusive, exclusive thing? I think that I want to revise it a little bit. First of all, I think there's a couple things at play here. First of all, I think that, you know, I think you have to muscle out a place where this work can be seen, you know, and there's no place, you know, you don't.
Yeah, you gotta muscle it out.
You gotta muscle it out. You gotta fight it.
We got something important going on here. Yeah. That's what they did.
Which is great, but then again, you don't wanna like make it seem rarefied either, you know.
That you don't have a choice.
That you don't have a choice. Well, yeah. But
I mean, you do have a choice. The choice is how are we going to do this? So, you know, you have rich kids who make experimental films because their parents sent them to form an aesthetic on this stuff. They make the films. Then the worst is in Ann Arbor, now they have all the filmmakers who come, not the worst, but all the filmmakers that come walk up on stage at the end and they do a little Q&A. It's all white males. Oh, God. You know, it's like, give me, you know, and it isn't all white males, and it's not their fault. But, you know.
It's a deal. Well, that's a deal with film and video, too, that came out years ago at Canyon, when Canyon was considering bringing in video, and Bruce fought it, and a bunch of people fought it. And one of the arguments was a class argument.
No, you mean Bruce Bailey or Bruce Conner?
Bruce Conner.
Oh, Bruce Conner
was fighting.
Yeah.
But you know, one of the arguments was a class argument. Like, people were trying to make an aesthetic argument. Well, this is just film, and it looks like film, and this is who we are. You know, and other people said, look, you know, what do you mean it's who we are? white people are the people who can afford film, you know, and people are making more engagé work politically, often shooting video.
What's that word mean?
Engagé, engaged, you know.
Oh, engaged. Yeah, that's a good
So
word.
you're just basically saying we don't care about people who can't afford film. You know, it's not an aesthetic argument; it's a class argument as well. You know, so I mean, I think that, you know, I'm a pan cineast. You know, I believe I watch.
What's the first word?
Pan. Like I like a lot of different.
Pan.
Yeah.
P-A-N.
P-A-N. I
Whereas
like.
para, you're above, below, you're
I like
wide
a lot
spectrum.
of things. Yeah, I see I see independent narratives in New York.
Right. Whereas Lynn is she doesn't tend to know the Hollywood stuff.
Yeah, I don't know that I know the Hollywood, but I do know independent narrative cinema.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I like it.
Well, what's
you know?
independent narrative mean? You mean
lower budget, you know.
like John Jost or?
You know, like, what would I go see? You know, I would go see the Mike Lee movie, you know. I mean, I would.
Oh, okay.
You know,
like
I would
Mike
see,
Lee.
you know.
You mean,
Yeah,
so
I mean,
art house film.
Yeah.
Yeah, art house.
So I would, you know, if I were programming something, well, I don't know, I'm going all over the place, but I will tell you, when I go to Ann Arbor, the narrative, like the narrative section, interests me the least.
Yeah.
You know, I'm always like, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
You know.
It's like the other friend says, I flew 3,000 miles to see this. I can see this on TV.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
See, but you guys haven't been there for a few years.
I haven't been there for a few years.
But you haven't heard any of the reputation. Have you heard any of this?
Well, you know what? I haven't been there, but I got the Traveling Ann Arbor show to come to Fordham last year. Last year, yeah.
And how was it?
Well, it was good. I think that I sort of skewed it towards experimental. I think I asked them to send.
You skewed it.
Yeah. I think I skewed it, but it was good. There was a lot of good work in there.
Okay, let's do 4 questions on Ann Arbor Film Festival, just off the top of your head. What does the Ann Arbor Film Festival enhance or intensify?
You know, I think it enhances or intensifies, you know, an outsider spirit to movie making, and it's not all stuff I love, but I actually appreciate. I actually think they were smart in terms of animation, experimental, and narrative, because it's kind of like 3 worlds meeting. You know.
Oh yeah.
And I always thought it was interesting they had a judge from each tribe.
Right.
You know, and again, I mean, I'm sort of like the narrative. I'm like, okay, you know, I don't really care as much. And frankly, animation, I don't care as much either.
Right.
But I always feel like, okay, fine.
Right.
You know, it's almost like strength in numbers in some ways, you know.
Strength in numbers.
And
is really...
to my mind, the narrative needs Ann Arbor the least of those 3. You know, a lot of them are like calling card films and really high production.
They're all dramatic showcase. Okay, so 2 is, what does it render obsolete? What does the Ann Arbor Film Festival displace or render obsolete?
What does it displace or render obsolete? I don't know. I don't know. I'm having a hard time with that.
And then what does it bring back that we previously got rid of? Like the idea of retrieval.
Well, I love that question. To me, it's you know, it harkens back to you know, to the cine clubs, which were never around in my day, but you hear about them, and you know, people getting together at libraries and public spaces, and you know, having a discussion, and you know, being able to see varied work, and you know, the element of surprise, which frankly, the animation and the narrative, you know, speaks to. You know, like I wouldn't choose to see those films, but I see them anyway. You know. And I think that's great, you know, and they are not my world, but I'm exposed to them there, and I think that's great, you know.
If you take the idea of the Ann Arbor Film Festival, press it to an extreme, what could it flip into? Like the reversal idea.
The idea of the Ann Arbor, and you push it to an extreme?
What would it flip into? Or could it flip into?
Well, it could flip into a whole... You know, I mean, it's sort of utopian as an idea, I think. You know, and it's an intelligent, engaged film community, and they're open to new things in the way that people aren't open to things in the world. You know, if you go around and you say, "Hey, Bill, you know, there's this new band I've been listening to," you know, and it's Amadou and Miriam from Ghana. You know, chances are somebody might say, "Hey, that's great. Can you burn me a CD? I'll put it in my car when I'm driving, and if I like it, I might buy it." There isn't that same kind of openness to film, you know, and you don't say, "Hey, you know,
could I give you the new Hollis? Could I give you a Hollis Frampton
there's
film?
this new kid in San Francisco who's
Right.
18 who's been doing these really weird films.
Right.
Can I give this to you?"
Yeah.
There's not that same kind of openness, but in Ann Arbor, when I meet somebody from Ann Arbor, and it does happen,
Yeah.
student, law student, adjunct professor in philosophy, doctor, these are all people I've met, and I say, "Hey, you know, I really like that film festival. I've been." They say, "Oh yeah, we love it. It's great. We go all the time." And it's really great. Why shouldn't people take a chance on seeing a show or two? And why shouldn't they sit? Yeah, I think it's community, and I think that it's that kind of openness and that kind of idea that you're taking a chance on films that are new and challenging.
Yeah.
Just like you might take a chance on music, or, you know, I've never tried Persian food. Oh, well, great. Why don't you go down and check out this restaurant? It's cheap and it's good.
Yeah.
You know, I don't sense that kind of openness in terms of film. You know.
Great, thank you, Mark. How about this? You've been with Lynn for 17 years. Congratulations. I respect that, my friend. How do you explain your longevity?
That's a good question. You know, I think we, you know, have a great relationship. We enjoy the same kinds of things, and you know, I think that there's a way that we're able to sort of emotionally and physically go off and do our own things, and then bring them back and find support and, you know, nurturing there, and then also go away. You know, and it's a question of, you know, being able to be independent and then being able to be together, you know.
Right.
And I think, you know, sometimes it gets tight in relationships, you know, and it's like, you know, you have nowhere to move, you know. And I think that Lynn is very independent, you know, and has her own thing going. She loves to leave and she loves to come back, and I'm the same way. You know, there's nothing I'd like to do more than go off somewhere. When I say go off, I mean either travel or work on my own work. And then there's nothing I'd rather do than come home, you know. And I think it's that kind of play that, you know, I really appreciate a lot.
There's no place like home.
There's no place like home.
Thank you. So why is it that our parents' generation have stuck together 30, 40, 50, 60 years sometimes, and ours tended to have this change where it was less marriages lasted long? Any guesses on why that change happened?
Well, I think you know, I think in those halcyon days of long marriages lasting, there are an awful lot of unhappy marriages, you know, and awful lot of like people sucking it up and saying, "All right, this is a shitty marriage, but I'm gonna stick with it because it would be the wrong thing to get a divorce," or you know. So that's not a good reason to stay together. You know what I mean? Like, you know. So there's that, and then, you know, well, there's a lot of things at play. You know, my father told me that that one of the things they attribute the high divorce rate to in France is the fact that people are living longer, in the sense that they feel like they can reinvent themselves several times in a lifetime, whereas it used to be like, okay, I'm 70 and this sucks. Be like, well, I'm probably going to die in the next 5 years anyway. But now, if people are 70, they go, 20 more years of this.
Yeah.
So I thought that was an interesting take.
That's very interesting. And did your parents stay together?
Yeah, they're still together.
How many years?
Yeah, they've been together.
Like 50.
Yeah, like 50 years. Yeah, wow. Yeah.
So what's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
I think women, that there's a, I don't know, I was going to quote that I'm Not There movie, Todd Haynes movie. Did you see it? Of course, how could you not, right?
Yeah,
But you know what? Remember he's in the cafe being a dick, as only Bob can be, and he's like, "No, there is a difference between men and women. Think of the most disgusting thing you can," he says to the woman, and you write it down, and I'll write down my most disgusting thing, and mine will be worse. Remember that scene?
Wow, I don't remember it. And so that's the men's reason will be worse is your answer. That's good.
But that's not what I think. I think,
no, you're just saying that's
I'm just
an
quoting.
example.
It's an
Okay.
example. No, I think that
are you saying that to defend men or
No,
to put us down?
put us down. That's the way I look at it.
Dude, that's what I started before we started. I says there's a line that says women know, men suppose.
That's right. That's right. So true. Yeah.
And I always go, wait, that seems backwards because men think they know because we're so linear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And women suppose too.
Yeah.
So it's a funny little twist, but that was good.
I think that I don't know. I think women are more realistic in some ways. I think they're more adept and adapt at adapting and at kind of being. I think men are more entrenched and more invested in a static worldview or something. I think that.
Why do you think women live longer than men?
Well, I think part of it's that.
Yeah,
and I think that I think generationally, like my father is much more tied to his identity, his work, and his identity and his place in the world.
Yeah.
And who he is
Yeah.
and all that. My mother's more like, yeah, well, I don't have much place in the world anyway. What are you saying to me? It's much more about. An immediate reaction and a more, I'm not going to say it's not rational, emotional. It's more like, what is this? What is this really? Not what are the structures that surround it, but what is it really, And I find that, there's just two women. I'm talking about my mother and my wife. But, I find that Lynn is much more open, and much more, I'm more liable to say, well, no, that's wrong. This is and she's more able to say, well, who cares if it's wrong or right? What is it? Realistically, what is it? And I think, part of that's just personality, but I think she's much more, or I think women in general are a little bit more, just more emotionally intelligent.
Yeah. Mark, I think you hit on what I say is the essence is that women think all these plans every day, and then the men go, well, you can only do this and this, and you can only afford that one. And the women, so the big task is for us to hear them and appear to be sincerely listening and let them go through us so that we are the processing support group to hear the ideas and not go stop the ideas and go, okay, no, you can't do that. And that's the challenge for men is how to filter it and go, well, okay, I got to realize she needs to say that.
Yeah.
Instead of that's why they live longer because they're letting it all out. And we're all like, stop, you can't do.
Yeah. I had a friend who's how should I put this? He he's gay, right? But he grew up in a house of women, and he said that how should I put this? He said that he and his boyfriend would always fight because his boyfriend was much more quick to say, we can't call that guy back. He didn't call us 3 times. Or he came to our dinner party and didn't bring a bottle of wine. Everybody knows when you come to a dinner party, you've got to bring a bottle of wine. He was 20 minutes late.
He was the linear one.
He was the linear. And my friend was more like, okay, you're right. He behaved badly, but let's call him anyway. Or let's see him. I want to see him. And the friend was always like, we can't see him. It's almost like etiquette or emotional kind of rules. And he attributed this to growing up in a household of women, and he said,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
much more like,
Oh, yeah.
well, what is it? What do you
Right,
want? What's in
right.
front of me? And less like, well, the rule says that if a friend doesn't return your call 3 times,
Yeah.
you don't call him again.
Amazing.
Or something, you know.
What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Well, it depends on the situation. I think, I mean, about some things there can be no compromise. You don't want to go diluting your political opinions, or you don't want to. Some things you feel strongly about, but I'm more of a compromiser. I don't trust. You know, Convictions can too often be misguided, or temporary, or wrong. So I tend to be, just in life, be more of a compromiser.
Beautiful. Is ambition based more on fear or joy?
Fear.
Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I think evil people exist. I mean, I don't know if there's evil out there. It's almost like, if there were no people, would there be evil? I mean, I think that, I don't see it as this kind of cancerous force.
Right.
I think it sort of starts and ends with people, alas.
Is perception reality?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I think that how you... I think that, it's that whole pre-Socratic idea, you never step in the same stream twice, because the water's always changing, and then you're always changing, so it's never the same stream. And I think, to me, that's the essence of modern art and film and everything, and it's that, it is what you make it on some level, and, no two people see the same film, and that's what's important, that it's varied, know.
Is loyalty based on reason?
Is loyalty based on reason? No, I think it's something else, I think that, I think it's instinctive and kind of emotional or something, more than rational.
Yeah.
In a capitalist society, it's a very linear based system, and I think that, we're moving towards, an accumulation of things, and a kind of, an anti-playful kind of worldview, right? Okay, you grow up, you do this, you do that, and it's all very rationalist. And I think, it's hard for people to accept that things may be pointless, or it may not be. I mean, we learn this worldview. We learn it in school, and I think that schools and some families, schools, and other institutions fight against this kind of more playful and conceptually vacant, or conceptually untethered way of looking at things. That things are more, more playful and pointless.
Yeah, my friend says it well. He says, "You don't believe in your blooming world, do you?" We sit around, we like, I believe in this. It's like, give me a fuck. Okay. So McLuhan talked about Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce as saying, everyone has creative powers, and they use them while they're sleeping, when they dream. Artists dream awake.
Uh-huh.
as dreams played a role in your creative process.
Well, that's really interesting. I have a film called Alone, Apart, The Dream Reveals the Waking Day. And it's this idea that, in good and bad ways, you have these dreams, and then, like a bad dream, you wake up, but you can't figure out why you're in a bad mood, and then around noon you say, oh, yeah, I know what it was, or something. And, it's this idea, the film is sort of set up like a oniric film or dreamlike film in the sense that
what's the word?
Oniric means dreamlike.
Oniric. Okay.
Yeah.
O-E-N?
No, Oneiric.
Okay, it's dreamlike.
Dreamlike,
okay.
yeah. So that you're supposed to look at the film, or one could look at the film like a dream, where things just kind of float, in some ways, not a narrative dream, but dreamlike in that way.
Yeah.
So, I think that. Yeah, dreams play a part in my creative process. I'm not trying to make dreamlike films all the time, but I know that I dream about my films when I'm editing, and I know that sometimes when I'm editing a lot, I'll go to sleep and then I'll be in the film in my dreams, and I think there is that kind of back and forth between the two worlds.
I left one thing out on the you create what you resist because you answered that so well. That came to mind was Louis Buñuel said, "Thank God I'm an atheist." That's like you couldn't summarize that you create what you resist. Zappa and Buñuel would be shit without fucking being raised Roman Catholic.
Yeah,
sorry,
so true. Yeah.
Sorry, that's their whole thing.
Yeah, it's so true.
It's like if I didn't have that, what would they?
Yeah. It's
true. Can you comment on this line? Filmmaking as an art form has been swindled by capitalism.
Well, I think that, I think it's true, from the fact that, that people want a linear narrative, or people want to lay down their $12 and they want a quantifiable experience these days. And it's if you look at a Ken Jacobs experience or a Barbara Hammer experience or a Chick Strand experience, it's less quantifiable, so it fits less well into the capitalist, experience. So I feel like, those are just three filmmakers, but I feel like a great film can offer you a challenge, whether it be boredom or confusion or difficult perceptual registers or whatever, in a way that don't fit well into the capitalist system. Supposedly, as you know, it's probably apocryphal, but supposedly, the reason we've come at this hour and a half
for this
length as a standard is that people felt like they could have dinner and 2 glasses of wine or whatever, and sit through a movie, 90-minute movie, and not have to go to the bathroom during
No.
that. Yeah.
Is this
It's like it's like a thing, it's like
known thing?
Yeah, scholars have surmised this.
Bathroom, that it's all around our it's very metaphorical. It's all about our system that you get things out of your body.
Digestive tract.
No, not digestive. When you shit and piss, what do they call that? Excreting system.
That's right, exactly.
It's all based on getting it out.
Right, exactly. So that says it right there, and there's this whole link between,
Great. I gotta. If you ever find out who exactly and where that's from,
I will.
Because it's folklore, but it's.
Yeah. To find it, the actual quote would be great. Yeah.
Because it could be some prankster putting it in.
Yeah, it's true. The other quote I really like, which doesn't really have anything to do with that, is the Godard quote that all cinema is documentary. It's just summer documentaries of actors playing parts.
You ever heard that's a good one.
Isn't that great?
All cinema is doc, but some are docs of acting, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Actors. Yeah, that's good. He's like, forget his film, just read them, man.
I know,
that's
so true.
what I was like. Okay, we're getting close to the end. Altman said, we're at the very beginning of what film can really be, we haven't come close to the medium's full potential yet. Everything is still so linear.
What can I say? I mean,
Yeah.
it's really true. I think maybe in some ways the film. Well, I mean, this is the Lev Manovich article. He argued that there was this kind of spirit of experimentation near the beginning, you know, and people were like trying. It was like, it's like my students. People were like taking out these cameras and going, well, what would happen if I flipped the camera over? What would happen if I threw it in the air? What would happen if I painted on top of it, you know? And then it became, you know, a slave to narrative, you know, in the 20s and 30s. And then, you know, his argument is that the digital age can recreate
Right.
that initial spirit,
Right.
you know, and also his argument is that the digital age hands cinema back to the single artist, you know,
Single
rather than
artist.
rather than a crew, you know, or something like that. So, you know, maybe I mean I agree, you know, maybe maybe film had to work, you know, work through its narrative in some ways.
Yeah.
You know, its narrative tendencies or something. But I think there's another tendency in cinema. You know, Lynn just said last night. She said, "Oh, you want to see Synecdoche, New York,
Right.
the new Charlie Kaufman film?"
Right.
And I just came out of me. I said, "I don't have any interest in that piece of shit at all." And she says, you know, she doesn't really follow
Right.
this stuff. And she said,
she goes,
well, where did that come from? And I said, and I'll tell you where the anger comes from. I feel like that guy is the heir apparent of experimental film in the sense that people go, well, it doesn't make any sense. It must be cool, you know. But I feel like it's the worst of both worlds because you got your star in there.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with Philip Seymour Hoffman. He's
Right,
great,
right.
but
I know exactly. We are so like because it's almost like where Peter Greenaway has gone towards the end of his
So
career.
true.
Not the end of his career. So it's like I asked Craig Baldwin about Peter Greenaway. Like once he goes, he's my hero. It's like Craig doesn't see anything, and I says, how could he even know who he is?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and it's like, yeah, I so get that. But I want to get these two in.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Because it's getting, and these two are important because you made the whole single artist thing is so big. That's what Annarbor was based on, the single artist. Then you got crane shots and aerial shots, and it's no longer one person making a film.
Yeah, it's true.
Because the film is the medium has gone into group, and you got okay. So Michael Apted said, when I asked him about why movie makers are so obliged to edit fast, because
I love that guy, by the way.
Martin Scorsese said he edits faster because of MTV.
Uh-huh.
Okay, then Michael Apted says, why are they so obliged to edit fast? Because we can take in information faster. So do you think we can take in information faster, or we're brainwashed to believe that?
No, I don't think we take in any information fast. I mean, look at Man with a Movie Camera. You know, that's incredibly cut.
Yeah.
You know, I showed it to my students, and they're like, to a person, they go, I can't believe this is made in 1927. I mean, I always think of the past as slow. You know, and I'm like, well, that's because you think that way.
Yeah.
But people were looking at that film. You know,
Yeah.
I don't need to sing
Right.
the praises of that film
Right.
to you, but
Oh,
you know,
God.
incredibly rich, incredibly fast,
Oh,
incredibly
man.
reflexive. You know, incredibly experimental in every way. So I think it's this kind of conceit. It would be interesting to read a media theorist. You know, I think every age thinks, well, we've got it down. You know, we're faster.
Right.
You know, it's like that Paul Varillo thing, speed. You know, like we tend to believe that we're faster and everything's faster, including us. You know,
Right.
ATMs are faster. We're faster. Da da da. And I don't believe that at all. I think I think perception is pretty innate. It's not cultural. It doesn't get better with time, you know.
Well put. It's like David Lee Roth said it best. Here today, gone later today.
Yes.
Okay. So humans invent things, then we imitate the hidden effects of those things. So we don't know what spoken word, printed word, toothpicks, bulldozers, cell phones have done to us because there's these hidden effects.
Right.
We shape our tools, and then they shape us. So I'm talking about the hidden effects, but this is a puny example. When we were older, us older folks, we would hear phantom phone rings in a room, like, oh, I think the phone rang. Because, you know, we think, well, maybe somebody trying to get a hold of me. And now kids, people have cell phones in their pocket all day on vibrate only.
Yeah.
They put it on the counter when they go to bed. They get in bed and they feel fan vibrations on their leg.
Uh-huh.
So that's the body actually imitating a hidden effect of something we invented.
Uh-huh.
So that gives you a little example where I'm after. What are some of the hidden effects of film and film viewing that we imitate? The hidden effects of film that humans have imitated or do imitate.
That's a great question. By the way, do you know that Rufus Wainwright song, My Phone's on Vibrate for You?
No, that's good.
Isn't that a great line? It's so, like, it says it all, you know, and he's, like, waiting for this guy to call, and he's, like, you know, he doesn't want anybody to, you know what I mean? It's just perfect. It's a perfect modern romantic sentiment. You know, I wonder if there's a way that, I mean, because the sort of palette of cinema is so narrow, you know, I wonder if there's a way we've become emotionally, conditioned to accept a really narrow range of human possibilities in our life. Let me explain. Like, let's say something like a romantic comedy. You know, we've seen them all on airplanes or whatever, you know. So I wonder if you go around in the world and you're kind of like open to the world's possibilities, but you have this if you only have 5 genres with which to read the world, you know?
That's it.
And you go, oh, there's a woman in the bar. I wonder if I'll give her my phone number, and we'll hate her, and we'll hate each other for 45 minutes, and then we'll.
That is good.
You know, so I wonder about that sometimes.
That's a great hidden effect, man. You nailed it good. That's one question I used to ask is, do Hollywood films create false expectations?
Well, that's the same thing.
That's sort of the thing, yeah. But you know, and it's not just Hollywood films. It's the whole history of storytelling. Yeah. So we always say films, but what did books do?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I agree.
But Greenaway says it so well. He goes, the history of literature is like this big. Like how many years? What would you say? 5,000 years or more?
Yeah, I don't know, 5,000 maybe. Yeah.
Okay, the history of cinema is 100.
Yeah.
If Finnegan's Wake's the peak of literature, nothing's come close in cinema.
That's true. Yeah,
and then then you see I'm not there to bring that up. I said this fucking guy, of course, because all the great experimental filmmakers, where they come out of, I found out. Semiotics. Yeah. And they realize they can't do it with words, so they, Ben Russell, Todd Haynes, they don't go, I'm going to be a filmmaker. They come out of semiotics because they go, words can't do this. Yeah. And that I'm not there is the closest thing I've seen to Finnegan's Wake on the big screen, besides Baldwin's Tribulation 99. Yeah. And of course there's others. Yeah. But it's that was well put. And I'll just tell you the other 2 answers because I'd love to hear you go. Eric Soderbergh, her documentary. She's an experimental filmmaker. She's so articulate. I would love to get you two to hook up with her. And I did this whole thing with her, and she says, advanced multitasking. So that's a hidden effect of cinema. So immediately I thought of a Roadrunner cartoon, how we go around like the coyote and we crash our car, then we just get a new car and we call up Acme and everything's just, and we're advanced multitasking. Hello. Because we see it on TV. Yeah. I mean, we saw it on movies.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Boy, we're almost. Can we just go till the end of the tape?
Sure.
Yeah, because
another 45 minutes.
Yeah. So that's good. So, Mark, can you react to her saying advanced multitasking and your wonderful wife calling it restlessness? Restlessness. Isn't that a great answer?
Well, that's a good answer. Now I'm nervous.
It's gonna click off any minute. You can just sit there and be nervous, dude.
You know, I was wondering about. You know, Walter Murch has this comment about editing, and he says, you know, it's amazing that you know, conventional editing works because nothing in our life prepares us to read a story in that way. In other words, we don't see things in master shots, medium, and close-ups, you know. But somehow it works, and somehow we internalize this language very well. We know where we are and stuff. And he gives this great example of bees, you know. And he says bees, if you have a beehive and you move it and you put it in a car and move it 3 miles and put it down, there's no problem. But if you have a beehive and you move it 2 feet, they freak out. The bees freak out, you know, because the context hasn't been changed enough for them to know. They're confused. They don't know where they are. You know, they're too close to where they had been, and they're not far enough somewhere else. And he uses it as an example to illustrate this 30-degree rule, where you're supposed to, if you don't change an angle more than 30 degrees, then it's a jump cut or whatever. But you know, I wonder whether there's some byproduct of cinema that, you know, because it organizes the world so artificially, usually, you know, that it, I don't know, like it, I wonder if we expect the world to be ordered in that way more, you know, and we're less open to kind of different kinds of vision and things like that. I mean, I think that's a byproduct, you know. I think we expect our life to be a movie, and we expect it to be cut and clean in the way a movie can be, you know. I mean, I think like someone like Brechtian talked about hallucinogenic vision and closed eye vision and things like that. And for instance, when I saw, speaking of independent cinema, you know, a corollary to I'm Not There was the butterfly and the diving.
Oh God, that was totally experimental film. I couldn't believe he's got that in a movie.
Yeah, it was experimental, but in a way, like I expected the whole movie to be like the first 5 minutes of it. You know what I mean? Like
that glacier.
Yeah,
fall. With the hand, like you couldn't see. Oh,
yeah,
I mean, is this going to be the whole thing?
Which I would have loved.
Right,
you know? Yeah.
right.
And then after a while,
it
became about, you know, the beautiful nurse and the, you know, and the beautiful wife and the beautiful nurse. I mean, you know, it's like it became very much about, you know,
how rich Snobble is.
exactly, yeah.
But you know, I really, I just toast those kind of guys. The big one also was when Koyaanisqatsi got in the movie theaters, and we all went, "This is great." He got it in a movie theater where people eat popcorn. We've seen this film for 20 years in Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
And then Scott's book came out on Canyon Cinema. And did you read it? They go, and Giorgio came in and rented all our films and ripped us off. Yeah. And it's like T.S. Eliot says, the mature poet steals, the immature poet imitates. It's like all the power to them. Yeah. Even though if you ask most people, like from our experimental film world, they'll sort of poo-poo Koyaanisqatsi. Sort of like you poo-poo Dali. Like, well, you know.
It's not really.
Yeah, but, you know. Anyways, that's very interesting because I was really impressed with that film, too. Well, it's not turning off, but why don't we get it? Well, let's see. What time do you guys got to leave?
We should probably go.
This is 59 anyways. Okay, we're done. Mark, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gerry.
I could go on forever. I'm trying to.
It was lovely.
You're amazing.